Hey everyone, my name is Farmer Allison, and today I'm going to show you how to make something I've been pretty obsessed with recently, fresh pasta. Pasta seems like it's going to be really terrifying to make, but I promise you it's not as hard as it looks. But I also promise you I'm a beginner, I'm not a pasta expert, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. Making pasta, it's pretty simple. All you need for the pasta dough itself is flour, water, eggs, salt, and olive oil. And the only equipment you need is a cutting board, a bowl, a fork, and a rolling pin. So we're gonna get started making our pasta dough. So all I've added to this bowl so far is 3 cups of flour and about a teaspoon of salt. Now, I just happen to have some weird flours in my pantry right now, so I'm using semolina flour and a local rye flour, but I've been using this recipe with tons of different types of flour, and it works really well with all-purpose flour, which is what you're normally gonna buy in the store. So I'm just gonna mix this up so that my 2 types of flour are incorporated. And just to save a little time, I might just use my hand here. And then the really important thing I wanna do is kind of mound it up almost so it looks like a little volcano, but then I'm gonna make a well right in the center. And into that well, I'm gonna crack 4 eggs. 1, 2, and if your eggs break, it's okay, because we're about to beat them up anyways. 3, and I don't want it to spill over, so I'm just gonna mound my volcano up a little bit more, and it spilled, that's okay. And 4. This to me is the hardest part of making pasta, and I struggle with it every time, so if your eggs spill over, it's all right, it's not the end of the world. So now I'm gonna take my fork and I'm gonna start slowly beating the eggs. And I wanna just incorporate a little bit of flour at a time. So I'm gonna get going with that and I'll check back in once this is coming together as dough. And at this point, I'm starting to have something resembling dough, but I've still got a lot of flour on the outside. So I'm actually gonna switch to my hands and I'm just gonna start bringing this all together. If you find that your pasta dough is way too floury, you can also add in a little bit of water, but just enough so that it starts to come together. All right, so I went ahead and I took the pasta dough out of the bowl as it was starting to come together. I didn't have to add any water, and this is sort of the consistency I was left with. It's still kind of tacky, and kind of loosely held together. So now it's time to knead. So I went ahead, I took it out of the bowl, have it on a cutting board, and I have a little bit of flour down, and that's just gonna help it from sticking to the surface or to my hands too much. And when we knead it, we're just gonna fold it over itself and push down, rotate, fold it over itself and push down. And this is gonna help the gluten develop so that we get a really nice structure to our pasta. So I'm gonna go ahead and knead it. We wanna go for about 10 minutes. All right, so I kneaded my dough for about 10 minutes, formed this really nice ball, and now it needs to take a little nap. So I went ahead and wrapped it in plastic wrap, and it is gonna sit in my counter and rest for about 30 minutes, and then we'll check back in. And we're back. Now that I've got my dough rested, we're gonna roll it out, and then I'm gonna show you guys how to make a few different pasta shapes. I'm gonna do a spaghetti, a fettuccine, and then a small hand-rolled pasta called cavatelli. All right, so I'm gonna start by cutting off just a small section of my dough, just so it's more manageable to roll out. I'm gonna put it down on a floured surface, and using my rolling pin, I'm just gonna start to roll it. And we want to keep it rotating so it doesn't stick. And I'm going to keep rolling until it's as thin as I can get it. All right, so this is the piece I've rolled out. And using my knife, I'm just going to trim away the edges so I'm left with a rectangle. And that's just going to make it easier to shape my pasta. So I'm gonna start with the short end, folding it over itself until I've done the whole length of the sheep. I'm left with this little roll up. Now, using my knife, I'm gonna trim that edge off just so it's even. I'm gonna start making really thin slices. And if I stop and I unfold one, it has formed a long sheet of spaghetti. Now, if I were to make my slices a little bit wider, more like 1/4 of an inch, and I unfold it, this is more like a fettuccine. All right, so now we're gonna work on making the cavatelli. So I've got my dough. I'm gonna cut off another small section and then wrap the rest back up so that it doesn't dry out at all. I'm gonna put some flour down on my cutting board. And then I'm gonna start working this dough into like a long strip. So we're not actually using the rolling pin at all here. I'm just gonna use 2 hands and roll this out. All right, so I've got this long rope of dough now. Using my knife, I'm gonna cut it into even-sized little nuggets, sort of. Then, using my thumb, I'm gonna have the nugget on the board. I'm gonna push my thumb into it as I roll my hand forward. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna flatten it out and create this little groove in here that's really good for picking up sauces when you cook it. So I put the nugget down, put my thumb in, and I roll forward. It almost makes like a little shell shape. So I'm gonna do that for the rest of these. And I'm gonna leave behind a nice little pile of cavatelli. And that's how you make fresh pasta. Like I said, it's really not as hard as it seems. It's a little bit of work, but it's a lot of fun. And I hope you guys come up with some new fun pasta shapes to show off. All right, happy pasta making.